The little girl, missing her deceased mother so much, secretly took her mother's portrait and came to her mother's tombstone. Crying, she poured out her grievances to her mother. She didn't want to go back to that loathsome home anymore because her vicious stepmother forced her to do housework every day, beat her, and made her kneel as punishment. Moreover, she threatened the little girl not to tell her CEO father. Otherwise, she would beat her to death. The poor little girl lived in constant fear every day. The vicious stepmother still wouldn't let her go. In front of the CEO, she said she would take the little girl to the mall. But then, on the pretext of letting the little girl exercise, she made the little girl run behind the car. The little girl finally collapsed from exhaustion. The stepmother got out of the car angrily and beat the little girl severely. Then she grabbed the little girl and threw her into the car. But when they arrived at the mall, the vicious stepmother only took her own son and locked the sleeping little girl in the car. At this time, the temperature inside the car had reached as high as 50 degrees Celsius. The little girl who woke up desperately slapped the car window and shouted for help. Just as she was about to be suffocated to death, a kind passerby smashed the car window and rescued her. Unexpectedly, when the CEO father arrived, he didn't blame the stepmother at all. This made the stepmother even more unrestrained in torturing the little girl. Ignoring the little girl's weak body just after leaving the hospital, she forced the little girl to eat cold ice cream. Soon, the little girl had a sharp abdominal pain and fainted on the sofa. At this time, the sound of the CEO coming home was heard outside the door. The stepmother immediately held the little girl in her arms and pretended to be a good mother. But as soon as the CEO left, the stepmother disgustedly threw the little girl aside. Under the stepmother's daily torture, the little girl missed her dead mother even more. So, when the stepmother was not at home, she quietly ran out and came to her mother's cemetery, crying and telling of her longing. But she didn't dare to stay too long for fear of being beaten again by the stepmother if she went back late. Unexpectedly, on her way home, she suddenly fell to the ground. Just as the little girl was carefully wiping her mother's photo, a woman suddenly came over. The woman looked exactly like the little girl's mother. The little girl blurted out and called Mom. Unexpectedly, the woman told her that she was not her mother. The little girl innocently asked the woman, "Why do you look exactly like my mom? If you are not my mom, then who are you?" It turned out that the woman was the little girl's mother. 1 year after her death, she unexpectedly got a chance to be reborn. A mysterious person told her that someone had exchanged their own lifespan to bring her back to life. And the woman must also live with a new identity. If others found out her true identity, she would be reduced to ashes. After being reborn, the woman was most worried about her daughter. So she met her daughter in this way. The woman sent the little girl home and told her that her name was Imran. As long as the little girl wanted to see her, she just had to shout her name and she would definitely appear on time. The next day, the little girl went to take a family portrait with her CEO father and stepmother. The three of them were harmonious and happy, only the little girl stood alone. The girl couldn't help but recall that when her mother was alive, she was also a little princess held in the palm of her mother's hand. Now she had to learn to please others. When her father asked if she was tired, the little girl shook her head. But when she saw her father pick up the stepmother's son, she couldn't help feeling a sense of loss. At this time, the girl's mother appeared again. The girl happily went forward and hugged this mother who couldn't be recognized yet. Then the woman took her daughter to eat desserts. On the other hand, the CEO didn't realize his daughter was missing until he arrived at the doorstep. So he hurried back to look for her. Suddenly, he received a call from the little girl saying that she was in a dessert shop. When the CEO rushed there, the woman had already left in advance. After returning home, the little girl asked her father if she could still go and play with the beautiful sister in the future. Unexpectedly, this was overheard by the stepmother who held a grudge. So she secretly threatened the little girl to tell her who the beautiful sister was. The little girl had to tell her that the beautiful sister was called Imran. So the next day, when the little girl went out to look for Imran, the stepmother secretly followed behind to see who this woman was. In order to avoid revealing her true identity, the woman immediately put on a mask. The stepmother taunted the woman not to think that she could get close to the CEO like this. The woman said she was not interested in these things at all. Then she left directly. After returning home, the stepmother vented her anger on the little girl. She took a stick and beat the little girl's hand hard. She also threatened the little girl to admit in front of her father that it was her own fault. The helpless little girl could only cry and agree. But the stepmother still didn't intend to let her go. She dragged the little girl to the bathroom and pressed her head hard into the bathtub. At the same time, the little girl's father found that his daughter was missing and immediately panicked. He searched everywhere and finally found the little girl.